Let's take a look at the money behind the Eurovision Song Contest. Since it began in 1956, the Europe-wide singing extravaganza has turned into a global brand. To host it means a major boost to your local economy, but to put on a good show comes at a cost, usually of many millions. And also, remember, every country has to pay to take part. So where does the money come from and where does it go? To get into that, I'm joined by Dean Vuletic, who has written extensively about the Eurovision Song Contest and has even taught a university course about it. Thanks so much for being with us, Dean. And you're in Malmo as well.
I'm in Malmo. Greetings from the Eurovision city.
So let's just get down to the basics here. I mean, how is the Eurovision Song Contest funded?
Well, basically, there are four categories of funding. First of all, there's a participation fee which each national broadcaster has to pay to be part of each Eurovision Song Contest. These days, that accounts for about 6 million euros in revenue. Then there's the host broadcaster, which foots the biggest part of the bill, around 10 to 20 million euros. And the host city. So this year, the city of Malmo is giving a few million euros for the staging of the contest. And then there's the revenue that comes in from commercial sponsorship, merchandising, ticket sales, and the money that is earned from your votes, from the public votes through televoting.
Oh, yeah, I hadn't even thought about the fact that they do make actually money every time someone picks up the phone to vote for their favourite country, don't they? I mean, this has been going for 70 years. You don't continue something for as long as that if it's, at a financial loss to your country. So who benefits from the way that the funding of Eurovision is set up?
Well, there is a big benefit for the host city, of course. In recent years, we've seen Turin and Liverpool host Eurovision, and they've made big profits from tourism, the visitors coming into the city for Eurovision week. Liverpool, for example, made £55 million last year.
I'm going to interrupt you there, Dean, because we've pulled the numbers up on this one. So let's just have a look at how it all did work out for 2023's hosts Liverpool, because the City Council said, as Dean has just pointed out, that they received a boost to the local economy of £55 million, which is more than 60 million euros, with nearly 500,000 people attending Eurovision events and 175,000 hotel rooms being sold that month. So, Dean, I mean, is that a typical story that the host city does get a big local boost?
Liverpool was particularly successful. Turin also profited, not as much as Liverpool, but it certainly did reap in a lot of rewards from hosting Eurovision. And of course, in the years immediately preceding that, the profits weren't so great because we were just getting over the COVID-19 pandemic. But generally speaking, cities can expect to hugely profit from Eurovision. And especially cities like Turin and Liverpool, which aren't the capital cities, aren't the cities of their countries with the most well-known image internationally. Or if we look back to Baku, hosting in 2012, the most expensive Eurovision ever, but it really put Baku on the international tourist map.
Yeah, I mean, it's the most expensive because they built a whole new stadium for it, didn't they? They spent something like $100 million on a brand new stadium in Baku. And what that says there, I think, is the amount of money they were willing to invest in that. It says something about the PR aspects of this and the image that you're able to portray if you do win Eurovision and then get to host it the next year, right?
Exactly. And it's also a springboard for hosting other events. When we think of the world of international mega events, Eurovision is one of the smallest ones. And it's a good test run for a country which has even bigger ambitions. So a country like Azerbaijan, which was also hoping to host the Olympic Games, or Russia when it hosted the Eurovision in 2009 and then went on to host the Winter Games, the Winter Olympic Games in Sochi, and the World Cup. So it's good for a country to have Eurovision on its CV as experience in hosting an international mega event.
And part of that is about the fact that, a country is able to put on an event of that side. And something that is a particular issue this year is security around, well, I mean, you're in Malmö, you'll have seen doubtless that there is a heightened security level there. And I know people are very nervous in Sweden. People I've spoken to there have said they're very nervous about any potential impact of anti-Israeli protests there. So is it particularly costly this year for the city of Malmö?
We'll have to see the final figures. I mean, Malmö, the city of Malmö, has invested about as much into Eurovision as Liverpool did last year, so a few million euros. But yes, this year the security threat is particularly high. I mean, security is always high around Eurovision because it is a very high-profile international mega event. But this year the threats are very particular, considering the backlash that we've seen regarding Israel's participation in Eurovision and international criticism over Israel's war in Gaza. So you do see a very highly visible police presence around the city. We haven't seen the protests yet. They'll be happening in the next few days, but there are a lot of flags being displayed from people's balconies, in the windows of their homes. There's a lot of pro-Palestinian graffiti. So you really do feel that this political story is impacting on this year's Eurovision. Visiting Eurovision Village, which is an area that has public events related to Eurovision, I have felt that there are fewer people at the Eurovision Village than there were in Liverpool, in Turin. So we'll have to see what the impact of this political situation is on this year's Eurovision.
Yeah, that's interesting. To bring it back to the sort of financial, it's often joked that a country might not want to host the Eurovision, a couple of years consecutively. Indeed, some countries have said they don't want to do it because it's too expensive. That feels like something you don't hear about very much these days. But is there truth in that idea that it's a bit more than some countries want to have to pay to do it?
Absolutely. We've had examples of that in history. Luxembourg winning back-to-back in the 1970s and then declining to host a second time round. Luxembourg, now one of the wealthiest countries in Europe, is back in Eurovision this year after a break of 31 years. And one of the reasons why it wasn't in Eurovision for that time is very likely because it couldn't fit the bill, or its national broadcaster didn't want to foot the bill for participating in Eurovision, let alone for risking a hosting of the contest.
The danger of winning
Israel in the yes, Israel in the late 1970s also won back-to-back and then declined to host in 1980. Very interestingly, Egypt, I found this in the archives of the European Broadcasting Union, was thinking of entering Eurovision in the early 1980s. It wrote to the European Broadcasting Union saying, look, we'd like to enter, but could you guarantee that we don't win, because we don't want to have to foot the bill of hosting the Euro. Israel
That's the strangest sort of corruption I've ever heard. It's like fixing a fight so that you don't win. Actually,
Egypt never ended up.
No, but I read that Morocco did end up taking part in 1980, which came as a surprise to me. 3 absentees this year, and they were absent last year as well, are Montenegro, Bulgaria and North Macedonia, who've all said that the fee to take part is more than they're willing to spend, particularly when things are quite tight in Europe at the moment. Is it really that expensive to take part?
For those countries, it's about 100,000 euros. Not every country reveals how much it is paying regarding the participation fee or what its budget is for participation in Eurovision, but we do have those figures from some countries, Ireland probably being the best example when we're speaking about these countries from the Balkans, because they're countries of a similar size, or their national broadcasting organizations are of a similar size, and Ireland paid 105,000 euros to participate in Eurovision last year. But then you have the additional costs, of course, of staging, of paying for your team, and the total for Ireland was about over 300,000 euros. Just over 300,000 euros. So this is what you're looking at for a country the size of Ireland. And for those countries from the Balkans, that is quite a big bill, considering their budgets, their limited budgets. So this is why
I think what you've mentioned there, I think some people will find interesting, is that that the performers themselves are paid to take part in Eurovision.
Of course, of course. But, different countries have different situations. I've met some artists in the past who've had to pay for their makeup artists, their costumes, because the television station couldn't afford to cover these things. So it really depends which country you come from. In Bosnia and Herzegovina, for example, the national broadcaster is facing a funding crisis. It hasn't been able to pay its membership dues to the European Broadcasting Union, so it's actually not allowed to participate in Eurovision for this reason. But then you have a country like Kosovo, which is trying to get more international recognition, wants to join the European Broadcasting Union, and definitely wouldn't have a problem in funding its Eurovision participation, because it really sees Eurovision as being an important tool for cultural diplomacy. So the stories differ according to the countries.
There's a revenue stream that we haven't talked about so far, which is sponsorship. And people who watch the song contest will notice the sponsors there. There's a hair brand that's sponsoring it. There's an official airline. There's an official cruise line of the concert. Has Eurovision become quite commercialized?
Well, it has, and this has always been controversial in the contest's history. Let's say in the late 1970s, there was a lot of debate in Eurovision among the national broadcasters about how commercial Eurovision should be. And ironically, it was the Swedish broadcaster which was most critical of the influence of large commercial record companies on the contest. And that was just as Sweden's popular music industry was about to boom following the victory of ABBA in 1974. In the 1990s, we saw the contest becoming more commercial, also because the European media landscape, television stations became more commercial. And in the late 1990s, that's when we started seeing more sponsorship and merchandising allowed. The contest moved to bigger arenas, so you could sell tickets that are actually quite expensive these days, to more members of the public. So that's when we saw the contest really become bigger and more commercial.
So are the sponsors necessary? I mean, would the contest not be viable without these sponsorship deals?
Absolutely, absolutely. The sponsors are necessary. It would simply cost the participating television stations and the host broadcaster too much to host the contest if there weren't these sponsors. If I go back to the late 1990s, one of the reasons why the contest became more commercial then was that Ireland won 4 times and had to foot the bill of hosting the contest 4 times. So this is why those commercial reforms were made to the contest as well.
Yeah, there's a I don't know if I'm sure you've seen the comedy Father Ted, where the episode where they do a spoof basically of the Eurovision Song Contest, where Ireland very deliberately sends the worst possible song it can find to avoid having to host it yet again and foot the bill. But while we're on about the host countries and the benefits for them, have we seen a positive impact on, for example, the music scenes and the music genres of the countries that win? I'm thinking of things like, Ukrainian rap after last year, or Finnish heavy metal after Lordi's win a few years back.
I think so. I mean, the classic example is that of Sweden, which was really transformed into a popular music superpower after the win of ABBA. These days, Sweden is the 3rd country in the world in terms of its net popular music exports. So in terms of exporting more popular music than it imports, with only the United States and the United Kingdom being bigger popular music exporters. So Eurovision was very important for launching the Swedish popular music industry, especially through ABBA. But since then, we've also seen the Swedes play a huge role in Eurovision as songwriters and composers for other countries. And, in recent years, this has just gone to show how successful the Swedish popular music is, how successful the Swedish popular music industry is globally. When it comes to Ukrainian rap or, Croatian
No,
rock,
I just said they were
well,
last year. The Ukrainian rap was obviously 2 years ago, wasn't it? I should correct myself on that because a lot of people know a lot about this stuff and they will pull me up on it.
yeah, exactly. When it comes to other countries as well, maybe the success hasn't been so global, but we have regional markets as well in Europe, in the Balkans, in the Nordic countries, and very often these Eurovision stars, which we might not hear of so much across the continent or across the world, they become stars in their regions. So it's not just about becoming a global superstar or even just remaining a national star, but there are also markets in between which Eurovision artists can profit from.
Just to finish, let's talk about the sort of the sustainability of Eurovision and the song contest going forward. There have been rumblings in many countries, particularly if they've had a run of bad results from the Eurovision Song Contest, where they've said, "Let's not take part next year. It's not worth the money. It's not worth the effort." Is the way the Eurovision's set up? Is it still going to be here in another? I mean, it's been going 68 years or something like that now. Is it still going to be here in another 68?
I certainly hope so, because we need it. Maybe we don't need it so much for financial reasons, but what we need it for is to bring us together. There is no other cultural event that brings Europeans together like Eurovision does. As you said, it has been going on every year since 1956. It has only been cancelled once, and that was in 2020 due to the COVID-19 pandemic. But this is something that has become not only a tradition, but part of Europe's shared cultural heritage. So I think it's worth every penny just for that reason alone.
Okay. Dean Vuletic, author and clearly fan of the Eurovision Song Contest, scholar as well of the contest. Thank you very much for joining us here on DW Business.
Thank you very much.